It's 1939 and you're at a county USDA office requesting a planting loan. Your white neighbor gets his before the first rain. You don't receive yours until the end of the season. The same form, two different results. And this is not rumor. It is documented facts. The USDA, the very same agency that is designed to help black farmers, use delays, denials, and quiet retaliation to quietly push black farmers off of their land. A federal judge said that USDA officials denied, delayed, and otherwise frustrated the applications of black farmers. So join us today while we discuss how the USDA pushed black farmers off of their land. And this is One Mic Black History. I'm your host, Country Boy. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at OneMicHistory.com. But without further ado, let's get started. Right after the Civil War, Union General William Sherman set aside land for freed black families. People called it 40 acres and a mule. Sometime later, that promise was taken back. Most families didn't get their land, and many became sharecroppers who operated on someone else's land for a small share of the crops. Even with these hard rules, black land ownership grew. By the early 1900s, black farmers owned and operated millions of acres of land, and on that land they built churches, schools, and co-ops. But then a new trouble hit. Boll weevils ruined cotton, tractors replaced field hands, and banks and merchants often refused fair credit to black farmers. Some families moved north during the Great Migration, and others stayed and attempted to hold on. Yet, to understand this problem, we need to go back to the very beginning of the USDA. The USDA was created in 1862, and for more than a century, most of the people making decisions in the building were overwhelmingly white men. Black professionals were largely kept in segregated corners like the Negro Extension, which had very little power to decide who got what. And that matters because in farming, decisions about information, credit, and timing are life and death. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the federal government rolled out the Big Farm programs. In 1933, Agricultural Adjustment Act paid farmers to cut production to stabilize prices. On paper, that could help out struggling families, but in practice, local USDA offices let white landowners pocket these payments and evict black sharecroppers rather than share that check. At the same time, New Deal programs like the Farm Security Administration gave out rehabilitation and tenant purchase loans, but black farmers got fewer and smaller loans if they got any at all. There was a deep shift happening. The USDA threw its weight behind its vision of modern agriculture. Capital-intensive research technology helped steer farmers toward bigger tractors, bigger acreage, and bigger everything. If you had the capital, you got more. If you didn't, you were nudged off your own land. That hit black farmers especially hard because they were systematically being denied capital since emancipation. And then there was the basic things that you needed to survive: credit, seeds, equipment, information. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights later described the USDA's programs as erecting high hurdles, often barriers, for minorities seeking allotments, loans, and even basic program information. This is the foundation. But what comes next is the day-to-day gatekeeping. If farming is a race against the season, delay is defeat. The Farmers Home Administration, meant to be the lender of last resort, became a tool of picking winners and losers. Over time, the Farmers Home Administration and the other USDA lending arms shifted attention away from poor farmers more towards solvent white operations and even picking community projects like pools and golf courses. But how did this discrimination show up? It was in quiet places like waiting rooms and filing cabinets. Black farmers would apply for operational loans January and February when they needed to buy seed and fertilizer. Local USDA officials who held enormous discretion would wait on the paperwork until April, then May, then June. By the time the loan was approved, if it was approved at all, the planting season was over, and that delay could be as deadly as a denial. The Numbers tell the story. As recently as 2022, the USDA data shows that Black farmers were approved for direct loans at only about 36% of the time, compared to 72% of the time for white applicants. Black farmers are rejected at the highest rate of any group. And this is not ancient history. Even when approval came, it often came with strings. Black farmers describe being pushed into restrictive loan terms, setting them up to fail. Requirements to buy certain equipment, plant certain crops, work with certain suppliers. The USDA staff might supervise a Black farmer into debt, withholding timely distributions, then foreclose. One documented case, a farmer was told that he was approved, went out and purchased livestock based on the approval. Then the loan was yanked and he had to sell the property to cover the debt that the USDA helped create. With all of this came humiliation as a part of the process. County office employees often use slurs. They refuse courtesy titles, called grown men by their first names. One Black farmer recalled being told all you needed was a mule and a plow. That's not advice, that's contempt. And these delays, they weren't just months. Black applicants often experienced a process that took 3 times longer than white applicants. In farming, those kind of delays meant missing the season, missing revenue, and often losing the land that was used as collateral for the loan. Money wasn't the only lever, though. Information was another. The Agricultural Stability and Conservation Service decided acreage allotments and distributed funds. The county committees were for years all white. Black farmers were effectively shut out of the rooms where decisions were being made. If you control who's on the committee, you could control who hears about opportunities and who gets the allotments that determine where your crop was legal and profitable. The Federal Extension Service delivered new techniques, pest control, access to demos, federal programs, but Black farmers' extension agents were often denied information by white supervisors, given inferior offices and equipment, and discouraged from serving the very farmers who needed them the most. Many Black farmers never learned about certain USDA offices or programs even existed for them. Imagine trying to compete with one hand tied behind your back and a blindfold on. By the time of the Civil Rights Movement and after Brown versus the Board of Education, some USDA offices in the South used their power to punish Black political participation. It would look something like this: denying an operational loan if you were a member of the NAACP or you tried to register to vote. Landowners and local credit sources sometimes aligned with county officials and would evict or cut off anyone who housed civil rights workers. In one Alabama case, a Black farmer was told by an FHA supervisor that if he rented land from a family active in civil rights, in fact, I may not let you farm at all. That's the power that the USDA used like a political whip. When you combine exclusion from decision-making, control over information, targeted retaliation, you could effectively immobilize the Black farming community. And you can see the fallout on the map. Black land ownership peaked in 1910 at roughly 16 to 19 million acres. By the end of the 20th century, it was under 3 million. More than 500,000 Black farms disappeared by 1950. And it wasn't weather or the market, it was discrimination sped up that loss. Heirs' property made the squeeze even tighter. When land was passed without a will, families often lacked a clear title. No clear title meant no farming number. And without a farming number, you couldn't get access to USDA programs, emergency aid, or even loans. That legal gap fed partition sales and bargain basement auctions that broke up family land and scattered wealth. By the late 1990s, Black farmers took the USDA to court. In Pickford versus Glickman, a federal judge found that between 1981 and 1996, USDA officials denied, delayed, or otherwise frustrated Black farmers' applications. Thousands received compensation, but many did not. Documentation was hard to produce, and plenty of discrimination failed outside of the covered windows. More recently, Congress passed a Targeted Relief Act for farmers harmed by discrimination, but lawsuits froze that effort, and the plan was replaced with a race-neutral assistance under the Inflation Reduction Act. Many farmers did get help, and many didn't get what they told was coming. All of this is not old, dusty history. In 2022, the improvement gap between white farmers and black farmers was still the widest of any group. A late loan could mean an entire missed season. You miss enough seasons, you lose your equipment or even your land itself. Researchers estimate that the long-term loss of black land and black farming income is well over $300 billion. In the end, two things can be true at the same time. The USDA helped stabilize markets and fed families, and yet for generations it lose local power in ways that cut black farmers' odds of surviving and building wealth. That loss didn't stop at a fence line. It drained rural black communities across the South and beyond. And here's the truth. The USDA did not need a white-only sign to shut out black farmers. It centralized power in county offices, left decisions to white folks who already controlled the land, credit, and information. Bias and timing did the rest. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy. This is the story of how the USDA stole land from black farmers. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemichistory.com. I'd like to thank all my financial contributors. Without you, none of this can be possible. I love you all. Peace.